Let's go!
Hello everyone, GL1 here, and welcome back to class number 2 on RC cars, or vehicles actually, because we're going to get into a lot of other things. So first thing I'd like to say is where to start on this is not that easy for me to think through, because there's so many details and so many places where to go with this. So I'm trying to think about it as logically as possible so that it makes as much sense to you all, the viewer. And I'm going to repeat myself because I'm shooting some of the videos out of order and in detail, so, just sorry about that. But, if you're new to all of it, then, probably is a good thing. So the first thing I'm going to go through is my charts here, okay? And there's terminology, and then generalities about how these vehicles operate. Okay, so the first thing, is RC car, radio controlled car. Okay, RC, radio controlled vehicle. Radio, this is a transmitter using a radio frequency. So that's why it's called radio controlled, as opposed in the last video we talked about remote, where it has a wire. You have antennas with these. So this is a lower frequency. This is a 75 megahertz remote control frequency, and this is for radio controlled boats. And now they run them on gigahertz, but back in the 80s for sure, they used about the 78, 75 megahertz. And that's what this frequency is. And this remote, this radio, is for this vehicle. And this vehicle here, Badzilla, uses a 2.4 gigahertz remote, and there's no antenna visible on the transmitter. So the higher the frequency, so this is 2.4 gigahertz, which is much higher than 75 megahertz by very orders of magnitude higher. So the antenna is really, really tiny. But when you have a lower frequency, you have to have an antenna that matches a portion of that frequency. This gets complex, in the amplitude of the wave. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Just basically lower frequency, longer antenna. All right. And this actually has an antenna on it too. It's not showing, but it's just a longer wire that I have coiled up. But if you wanted to go greater distance, you have like a plastic wick you can put in and have the antenna go up. That would allow it to go further, is transmitting to it. Whereas this doesn't need that because it's such higher frequency. So the things that we're going to go over: speed control, servo, and special functions. So let me go over to this chart here. All right, so this is your two basic remote control designs. This is for 2-channel remotes. So 2-channel, forward and backwards is one channel, and left and right is another channel. Now this is also 2-channel, but it doesn't steer like a car. How it steers is you have one side of the treads going, if you want it to go one way, and then this one stops, and then the other tread will go, or you can have it steer even faster by having one go backwards and one going forward, pulling it that way, and then reverse. You have both go in one direction and forward both go in the other. And that is this design here. But this doesn't have a left or a right. It's just forward and backwards. And then you can go up and down to steer. So that's how that steers. And there's going to be a video of this racing around and doing all that. So you'll see that. And then this is the pistol grip remote, and that's what you have here. So you have your steering up here, and then this is reverse, and this is forward, and then your batteries go down here, And I do show you the battery pack. This runs on 9 volts. It's got 8 AA batteries in there. So actually, you know what? That's 12. So that's a lot of energy going through there, actually. Some of these remotes, actually, what it has is you can, I mix myself up, you actually have a plug, you can plug a 9 volt in instead of the 8 AA's. All right, so here's your basic vehicle here. You have your front of your vehicle, and then you have your steering servo motor, and that's a box that houses a motor with an arm, and the arm is very high torque, and it pulls the wheels, it pulls this way or that way for steering. I'm going to show you that. You have a spot for your battery, and this is the battery that goes in this car. It's a big, heavy, probably 1.5 pound battery, 3,300 amp hours. Now, your cell phones have batteries that are, very thin, and they, they're more amperage than this. So the technology's changed a lot. However, you can't discount a larger battery even if it's the same amperes. So for example, let's say you had a 3,300 amp hour battery on your cell phone, wafer thin, right? Little thin, flat battery, and you hooked it up to the car. Would it work? Yes. Is it going to overheat and probably blow up? Yeah, probably. The motors on these vehicles, the weight of the vehicle, sometimes these vehicles are like 15 pounds. This one's probably about 4 to 5 pounds. But it's a lot of weight moving very fast. It's taking that power out of the battery, the amperage, the voltage out of the battery very quickly. The battery heats up, the motor heats up, there's a lot of heat. And as you might see, if a lithium battery overheats, like on a Tesla, something happens, it can overheat and the whole thing can catch on fire. It can happen on RC vehicles, but it's rare. And this is not a lithium battery. This is nickel metal hydride, which is the technology before lithium. The first technology for rechargeable was nickel cadmium back in even the late 70s. I had a rechargeable hovercraft. It had two little tiny cells, and it had 4D batteries, and it had like a gas station thing. So you had this hovercraft with a motor and the 2 little batteries, and what it was is a disc like a spaceship, and it had 4D batteries, and the D batteries would actually plug it into the hovercraft and charge up those 2 little 1.25 volt NiCads. They were little tiny things like that. I don't have them anymore, and then it would run for a little bit and then shut off. And the good thing about NiCad is they would last for years. It would lose power over time, but I've had NiCads last 20 years. Nickel metal hydride, maybe 10 years. Lithium, probably even less. And lithium loses its power, as well over time. So there's your battery, goes in there. You have your receiver controller. It's like the brain of the vehicle. You have your speed control. That tells the motor how fast to go. So this controller goes to the steering, tells it when to steer, and tells the speed control how fast for the motor to work. And then you have your gears in there. So, an example, this is a perfect example. This is Super Blackfoot, which was a black pickup truck, but I didn't like the pickup truck body that much. So when the Bumblebee craze came and there were a lot of Camaros, and I got this new bright Camaro RC vehicle, and really cheap, and I used the vehicle for something else. I don't even know where it is because I modified so many things. But I wanted the body so I could put it on top of my Super Blackfoot from the late 80s. So if you compare this to here, okay, now the one difference is the battery goes underneath it. So it slides inside, this pulls off. And actually, in the other video, I show you all that. And then this slides in there. Actually, very quickly, pull that out. And then that tabs out of the way, like that. And then that spins up there. And then you can put that little pin back in there, and that holds it in. And one of the reasons why they put the battery here is it keeps the weight of the vehicle low, helps give it more stability, and it's also in the middle of the vehicle. So it's not, there are vehicles where the battery is on the side like that. They usually have other things on the other side to help counterbalance that. But with a heavy battery like this anyway, you definitely want it centered in one way, either vertically or horizontally. So looking here, you have your motor back here. And this is a heat sink that slides onto the motor to keep it cool. Okay, because like I said, the motor gets very hot. You have your, this is your receiver from the transmitter, and then you have your speed control, and the speed control has wires that go to the servo motor here. These are the servo motor. They go back into, actually they go into the receiver, the control. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. They go into the controller here. That sends voltage to the servo motor, which I am going to show you that moving. And then this is the speed control, and that goes directly back through these thicker wires to the motor back here. Okay, and so that is your general design. So both of these are 2-channel, forward, reverse, left, right. I actually made a 4-channel vehicle, and I have something that is 11 channels, a very sophisticated RC vehicle. It's more than a vehicle. It's actually a replica of a bomb diffusing tool. I mean, like that, you would use if there was a bomb and you wanted to defuse it, you would take this vehicle and go and take it into there, and then it has an arm on it and a camera, and diffuse it. And I have a replica of that, and it's very sophisticated. So I got it for an incredible price, so I was so glad to get it. It's really neat. It has night vision as a camera. We're going to get into that too. But all right, so this is another level up on this class, and I'm going to show you the videos. Okay, so I'm going to make sense of what looks like a mess over here to many of you, because it's quite complicated looking if you're not used to looking at this. So the first thing here, this is the battery, right? So now there's one of these clips here, and you can pull that out, and then this moves down. This vehicle is over 30 years old, and it's gone through several modifications, but you can still get these batteries. And this is a nickel metal hydride battery, 3,300 milliamps, which is quite a bit. It's heavy. I'd say it's probably 1.5 pounds, and it's got a lot of power to it. A lithium battery would be lighter with more milliamps. The only thing is, if you get a battery that's too powerful and you run the car too long, you can burn up the electronics. Everything gets very, very hot on these vehicles. There's a lot of amperage, and in fact, they get so hot that they need heat dissipating technology to try to cool things down. And so this is the brain, okay? This is the speed control and the steering controller, and it's aluminum here with these little fronds here, and there's air gaps, and that's actually a cooling mechanism to cool the electronics out because it's handling so much amperage. As I had said, this car goes 20-25 miles an hour, so it's got a lot of power, and with the battery it probably weighs maybe about 4-5 pounds, so it's got a lot of momentum when it's moving. Now the motor also gets very hot, and this is the motor here. This is a 540 motor. This is a high performance motor. In fact, this motor went to a boat. Very high torque, and boat motors are very high torque motors, thick wires inside. So you can get 540 motors that have different specifications on how much torque they supply. And to cool this motor off, this is an aluminum heat sink. This slides onto the motor, and all of this is there to dissipate the heat. So when the wind hits this, and it helps cool it down, keep your motor cool so it lasts longer. So, all right, so we have the speed control and the steering. So that controls that, but in order to get a signal to that, you have to have a receiver. So this is, your remote control is your transmitter, right? It's your transmitter. So you transmit, forward, reverse, left, and right. 2 channels. Okay, so you have, you have your forward, reverse is 1 channel, and your left and right is another channel. And this can actually handle 3 channels, but we're only using 2. So here's your receiver, and it has a section, and if you can see that, these pull out. See these little plastic pieces here? They see how that has a plug in there, okay? And that controls your speed control, your servo, and your servo for steering, which is a motorized gearing system. And so the transmitter transmits its frequency, okay, to this remote. And actually, you know what? When I said this was a 27 megahertz, this is not. This is a 70. What do we got there? 75 megahertz. So very high frequency. It's a boat frequency, actually, radio controlled boat frequency. So it'll go even further. The higher the number, the further things will go, and with less energy. So you have 27 megahertz, and then 49, and then 75 for boats, and then 2.4 gigahertz. So you can transmit with less battery power and go further. You can always use more battery power and go even further with a lower frequency. So this uses a bunch of batteries, this transmitter. And that slides out. And this uses, a little piece of plastic fell there. If we look at this, uses 8 AA's. Okay, so that's a lot of voltage. You have 9 volts there transmitting on 75 megahertz. So that receives the signal, and then that sends it to the brain, and then that will move your servo. Here's your servo over here. That's your motor, and it's got a very high torque gearing system inside, and it has an arm on the top. And so when you tell it to do things, that arm moves and pulls the steering just like a real car. So in a real car, you have a steering wheel, and that's hooked up to a motor that then moves another motor, or it gives it signal. Basically, you have a servo on your car, and then that tells the arm to pull, and then that pulls your tie rods, your steering rods here, and then that moves your wheels back and forth. And actually, I can show you that in action. So we'll plug the battery in. Okay. And I always turn the remote on before I turn the vehicle on, so it has control right away. Because sometimes you don't want to turn on the vehicle, not have a remote, and all of a sudden the thing takes off in front of you, when that can happen. Then turn that on. And the first beep tells you it's on, the second beep tells you it's connected to the remote. So I'm going to steer it. So take a look at that servo arm. See how that's pulling it and pushing it. So very finely tuned. Okay. And then now with the speed control, because this is an electronic speed control, you wouldn't see anything happen. It's all happening in here, and that's going to send voltage through these wires to that motor and tell it what to do. On electronic speed control, there isn't anything moving. There are, manual speed control where there's a second servo that actually is scuttling a switch over a variable resistor, actually. Okay, a very high amperage capacity variable resistor, because that variable resistor is, again, going to take the brunt of all that amperage from the battery, all that power, and it's going to get very hot. And even that will need a heat sink. Your variable resistor will need a heat sink. So I'm going to turn this off here. And then safely I unplug it, because you just don't want any accidents. But with an electronic speed, with a manual speed control, you have that variable resistor, and if you'll notice, well, I'll go into that another time. Okay, so and you can actually, if the arm of the servo is in the forward position when you plug the battery in, it's going to take off on you. So, just as a safety measure, I always make sure the remote is on first, because the remote is going to bring everything to the middle. Even on, it's set up, if you tune the remote right, what happens is as soon as you put the voltage on, the remote's going to signal the switch to go to the middle, so it won't be going forward or backwards. So that might be a little bit too complex, but just to be accurate. So here you have, using erector set pieces, I built my own connectors to be able to hold the body on, okay? And then you have, that slides down. I used a little aluminum tube, and I drilled a hole through it, and you could see it has all these little plugs. So I could take the whole thing apart. These are the original arms for the original Super Blackfoot body, which was a black pickup truck, a Ford pickup. So this is, basically the general design for an RC vehicle, but this is a pretty sophisticated one. This has oil-filled shocks in the front, so actually has metal shocks, and you can fill those with oil, and then you have a spring that pushes it back up. It has a dampening, and it has, these are control arms to give it a little bit more stability and strength. And so it has what's called independent suspension in the front, so the wheels move independently, and they also has independent suspension in the back, so that also moves independently, and that gives you a lot greater control when you're going over rocks and bumps and things. This is a rear-wheel drive vehicle only, so the front wheels are free. Now, you see how well that spins? Okay, that has ball bearings in it. So it's very quiet, and it has expensive little ball bearings in it. And I'll take the wheel off and show you that. And the back also has that too. So if we look underneath, and so, you have, this is where your gearbox is in here. And so, here's something. So when you spin the wheels one way, watch this. It's got what's called a differential in it. And so when you move this wheel one direction, the other wheel moves in the opposite direction. Now there's a release in there, a release gear. So if you can turn them both at the same time, and then that's turning the motor. I know you can't, trying to get the distance here right so you can see that better. Okay. So, all right. So, okay. So there's a resistance in it, but if I move it like that, so I move this one back and the other one goes the other way. So I'm not going to get into what a differential looks like too much right now, but it's a complex system of gears, and what it does is, now when the motor is pushing, one wheel is not going the opposite direction to the other. Obviously, then it would spin in a circle. It torques both wheels in the same direction. But by what the differential does is, on an RC vehicle and on a real vehicle, it allows the outside wheel, when you're going around a turn, to go faster than the inside wheel. So when a car is going around a turn, you're making a circle. The inside wheel is going to do less of a circle than the outside wheel, because the outside wheel has to travel a further distance. So if you just look at this, if I go and I take the car right now, and I were to just move it like this, right? The inside wheel doesn't really need to move at all. Or let's say I just move it a little bit forward, right? And I'm turning it. You can tell just very logically, this wheel's only moving like 2 or 3 inches, but the outside wheel is traveling like 3 times that distance. And so this wheel is traveling faster. Well, if you don't have a differential that allows that actually gives more power to the outside wheel to go faster, then it'll still steer, but the wheels are going at the same speed all the time, and it wears the rubber down. So the rubber is going to be grinding on the ground as it's turning because it's still going the physics of the fact that the outside wheel does have to move faster than the inside wheel, but the rubber will be tearing. If little by little, if the outside wheel is going faster, then it allows it to stay in contact with the ground better and gives it more control. And as I had said, this vehicle is over 30 years old, and the nubs on the rubber are still there. They were higher before, but they're still there because they haven't worn down that much. One, because I really take care of my car and I don't my vehicles, and I don't drive them all the time, and I really like to keep them in great condition. But also because of that differential situation. And the original wheels were yellow, and I put some gray paint, spray paint, and then hand paint, acrylic, and then I spun it, and then I got this effect on the outside of the tire, which I thought was kind of neat. The other thing that this has is it has what's called dog bones in the back. So you see this metal shaft here, that's the drive shaft. So the motor goes into this gearbox, and you can open that gearbox and get in there. In fact, everything comes apart. I had to build this vehicle. It comes in a model kit, and you have to put the whole thing together. And all the gears and, the differential. And then you have this metal piece here. You have metal gears inside. And then that goes to here, and that transfers the power to the wheel, to the tire. And you can hear it. So it's not that easy to spin. The harder it is to spin, that means the higher the torque of the motor and the gearing. So that means the car will have a lot of torque. This vehicle has a tremendous amount of torque. It can flip it can do wheelies, so it can go forward, with a lot of torque. And because of the sophistication of the suspension and how big the tires are and how much power that motor has, very little difference between this vehicle and if it were four-wheel drive. What's nice about it not being four-wheel drive, the advantage is it can pop wheelies easier because there's less weight in the front, and it uses less battery power. You just have one set of wheels moving. So four-wheel drive does use up the batteries faster, it used to be that a rear-wheel drive vehicle was faster, but technology's gotten so much better that's not necessarily true. Most of the weight is in the back, one because of where the battery is, but also the motor, so it makes it easier to pop wheelies. But with a vehicle with tires like this, so if you have a real pickup truck in life and you have really big tires on it and a really powerful motor and it's only rear-wheel drive, it's going to do quite well off-road. In a difficult spot, going slow over rocks or rock climbing, no, it won't do well on that. But if you were to drive it fast over really bumpy land, it's going to do quite well. So I'm going to take these wheels off and show you the bearings. All right, so I took one of the front wheels off, and as you can see, the original color was yellow, and inside was a bearing. And let me show you what that looks like. So it's a little metal wheel within a wheel, and inside are little ball bearings, and it's greased inside, and then that fits just like a real car, and that is such a great thing. And that snaps in, and now you have a wheel within a wheel that's all greased and has bearings, and that's why it spins so well. And here's your the nut that holds the wheel on, and then this is your multi-tool, and then that fits inside there, and then it has also other sizes. And I have, of course, a real car, and my bearings on my car, there was this loud noise in the back, and I was bothered by this, and I'm like, I think it's the bearings. And I had never done anything like this before, but I said, I bet it's like an RC car. So I said, I'm going to try it, and I took it apart, and sure enough, it has a bearing just like this. It's actually a wheel within a wheel about that size. And I just had to use tools, like I used pipes and hammers and a pry bar, and I got it off and I put the new one on and snapped it in, and that works. It fixed it, just like, no, the bearings wear out after a while, and there's friction in there and they make a lot of noise. And that would probably happen with a toy as well. Try to line that up there. And there, that just, you push that on there like that. And, so it was great because knowing about RC cars allowed me to be able to fix a real car. So I put the nut inside that first, and then I just turn that. And you don't want to over tighten it and damage the bearing, but, pretty tight. It can handle it, stainless steel too, so it doesn't rust. And so there you go. You have your wheel with a bearing, and the back ones have bearings as well, so more frictionless. Oftentimes, even if it's a more expensive hobby grade RC vehicle, it'll have Teflon bearings. So they're good too. They're not as good as a metal bearing with ball bearings inside, but that does give it some, slippage. And a lot of times, even on cheap RC cars, they'll have the piece that the wheel goes on to, the whole mech. I don't know what all the wheel terminology is, but the whole thing will be made out of Teflon that the wheel slides onto. So it'll just be all Teflon plastic, and and it gives it somewhat of a frictionless surface. So that's the up close of this car. So let me get into some other things with you. All right, so in higher end radio controlled vehicles, the bodies are held on by little pins here, and you can just slide those out. Now, being that this is not the original body for this vehicle, I had to customize how the pins attach, and this one's always difficult to take out, so I have to use some pliers and pull that out there. And then I had to use washers to kind of tamp everything down. And the body comes off, and that's what it looks like. To some of you, a bit of a mess, right? So let me show you, first of all, the action with this. So here's the remote, and this is our steering. It's a pistol grip steering. So notice as I slowly turn this, the wheels slowly turn. If I go fast, it turns fast. Okay, and that's called digitally proportional steering. So it's just, got a controller in it, electronic mechanism that allows you to gradually steer the vehicle for finer control. Because a car like this goes about 20-25 miles an hour, and you can modify it to go even faster, so you really need that kind of control on it. And then it also has a digitally control speed, which here's your pistol grip. So when you pull that, it goes forward, and when you push, it goes backwards. Now, there's a hesitation on this vehicle on going forward and backwards. That's to protect the gear system. This is an electronic system, electronic brain and electronic speed control. And what they do with that is so that you're not racing ahead at full speed and then ram it in a reverse, which damages the gears. They give it a little bit of a hesitation. So you need more space. It also makes it harder to control in a small area, so you might bump it into your furniture and stuff like that. But it does protect the gears. There you go. And then you see I hit the reverse. There's a delay, so often I have to hit the reverse twice to get it to go backwards. So that's how that operates. And let me delve into here with you and show you what's going on a little bit more detailed. So on the remote itself, what it is that you order the remote and the electronics separately from the vehicle. This vehicle came with a whole nother kind of speed control, an analog speed control, and this is digital. And I'll show you analog in another video. But here you have some buttons here for control, and then what this does is, depending on how the vehicle is put together, you can switch whether when you turn it this way, it turns the direction you expect it to. So I want it to go like a car, so when I turn to the forward, it goes to the right. I'm more comfortable with that adjustment. And then this one will do the speed control, the forward and reverse, and then you can have it where when it's one way, it's going forward, and one way it's going backwards. And sometimes if you wire the vehicle up incorrectly, you can just switch it one way or the other. So let's say you're putting it together and you wire it so that when you pull the trigger, it goes backwards instead of forwards like you wanted. You can just hit the switch, and then that reverses everything. So that's how that works. And there's also some control on remotes on how you can fine-tune your steering. And there's often, here we go, there's a wheel here. And if you turn that wheel, that does, if you look at the tires, look at the wheel, it turns ever so slightly. So if it's not going straight, you can tune it so that the trim level, it's called trim, so that you can get it to go straight like you want. So that's the features of the remote. Now this is an analog remote. This is a 27 megahertz remote. So what's unique about this setup I have here is it is part analog and part digital. So you have digital speed control, but you have, instead of digital remote control like 2.4 gigahertz like the other vehicle, this is 27 megahertz, a lot less megahertz in frequency. And so what it needs is it needs a longer antenna. So if you see this white wire here, this is the antenna. And it's kind of like a television, an old television antenna. And here you have the antenna on your remote is really long for 27 megahertz. It will work if you have it pushed in some, but to get greater range, you need to pull the antenna out all the way. And if you're going to go far away with your car, you can put what's like a plastic wick on the antenna and then have that sticking up and get greater range with your vehicle. But I don't really drive it more than 100 feet, 150 feet away, and this is a powerful remote, so it works just fine. So let me pick up the car here, and I'm going to turn the remote off, and then I'm going to turn the car off. The batteries on these vehicles are very powerful, so there's a lot of amperage, so you don't want to mess with it when it's plugged in. So here's your switch and for the on-off. And actually, if you notice, the switch is covered with plastic. It's got a little rubber, clear plastic on it, so that way water doesn't get into it. And then you just switch it off like that. And then this is the battery connection here. And I'm going to unplug that, and then we're going to go look more in depth on this vehicle. All right, so what I'm showing you here is the digital steering, how you can slowly steer the wheel one way or the other, and you have the digital speed control where you can control it going very slowly and then going very fast and not being able to stop it in time for hitting the furniture. So it is made to be outdoors. This one here, this is 2-channel. As you can see, it's just a left and right, forward, reverse with treads, and very fast, very high torque. As I always say, nothing beats treads. Tread, you're laying down a track for your own vehicle, and then you're just moving the motor and gears and all the acceleration right along that track. So that's why they're so good with snow. And now you can spin it in circles and turn everywhere. And there's a wheel that will do that too, which we'll be getting into sometime, called the Mecanum wheel. And it's a whole nother technology, wheel technology, which would be great for space vehicles. And here we're coming to the battery, and I'm showing you just how quickly and easily it is to remove this lithium battery. You don't have to have any kind of other case. It just snaps in. It has little tabs that lock it in, and then you put it in, push it forward, and then it hits the electric tabs, and then you just move this little thing in the back, this little plastic switch, and that holds the battery in place. And here is just some additional footage of the Super Blackfoot Camaro. Just move in, showing you its digitally proportional steering and speed control. So I was just watching my video, and there's something that I forgot to get into a little more. I got sidetracked talking about the hovercraft and all that. All right, so why would a cell phone battery be a bad idea to hook up to a vehicle like this, even if it was like 4,500 amp hours? Well, there's a thing about electrons, okay? So when you have a battery, you're transferring electrons out of the battery, and that's the energy, that's what's, giving energy to a device, whether it's mechanical or electronic. Your phone gets hot, right? If you run it for a long time. It's not just the screen, it's the energy. It's taking energy out of the battery, and as those electrons are running out of that battery, they run out at a certain speed, and a certain number of them run out, and that there's always heat loss until we get superconductivity. But when electrons are running through the circuits themselves of the phone, they're running, and you're putting on apps and things like that. Well, maybe you have like 11 apps open. So all those electrons are running all those apps constantly in the background, running through the electronics of the phone, running the screen, running the volume, the speaker, all that. And the phone's heating up because no system right now is perfect. There's heat loss. And so those electrons are running through the copper wires or whatever material they're running through, aluminum wires, and there's heat loss. Okay, so a battery like this, these are what's called mini C's inside here. They're not C batteries, but if you take a look, you can see the cells inside. All right, there's 6 of them. They're called mini C's, and so you have your electrons inside all of these, and they're all linked up actually in a row, okay? And they come out, this is your positive and this is your negative, okay? So the electrons can run at a certain number of electrons. Let's say they're people, okay? And they're all going to run through these pipes, and they're going to loop through, it's going to loop around and come back out and through these thick wires, okay? So could you hook this battery up to a cell phone? You could, if there was a way to do it, okay? It would work. In fact, I've even run a laptop off of a radio control car battery. I soldered in the connector for it and ran a laptop because it ran on 7.2 volts, and this is a 7.2 volt battery. You can have, it's 3,300 amp hours. So let's say it's 3,300 people, all right? They're running through a pipe this big, little tiny people, right? 3,300 of them running through a pipe this big, and then they get squeezed a little bit into these wires. Well, if you have a cell phone battery, which is very thin, all right, you have 3,300 people trying to run through something very thin. They can't, they bottleneck, right? They push on each other. They're bumping into each other more, creating even more heat. Now, a cell phone is designed to work with that battery so that the people running through the battery is timed in such a way that it only needs the people to run but so many at once, and all running at, let's say, 7.2, let's call that miles per hour. These 3,300 people are running at 7.2 miles per hour through here, okay? And your cell phone also let's say it's also the same kind of battery, 3,300 amp hours, 7.2 volts, but the battery is physically thinner. So they can't actually go through as easily. So now the demand that the cell phone, the electronics of the cell phone is asking of the battery is tuned, adjusted to work with that particular battery on how quickly the people can get out of it. An RC vehicle has a big motor, okay, with a lot of torque. And if you tell it to go full speed, if you tell it to go up a hill full speed, it's really telling it to go a lot of energy. Let's give everything we can fast. I want all you people to run at once through these pipes to get through. They're going to be all running together through a bigger pipe. And the bigger the pipe, the more you can keep the heat down. And it's easier for them to get through. If you put a thin battery, even though the ampere is the same and the voltage is the same, the demand that this motor is going to ask of that battery is more than that battery is meant to be able to do all at once, and that's why it would overheat and blow up. So, theory here, if they use right now packets of AA size lithium batteries to power lithium-powered cars, real cars, right? So you have your hybrids and everything, and they have like these boxes of a whole bunch, hundreds of AA's. I believe that when they make the batteries physically bigger themselves, even if they're the same voltage, they will be able to get the electrons out of those batteries more efficiently, keep it cooler, and they will find a big improvement to the capacity of the battery and that it doesn't overheat. Now, I can only think at this point that the reason why they're not doing that is manufacturing costs. Because definitely if you have a radio controlled car battery, so like this battery here inside, these are lithium batteries inside, but what they are is it's three or four, I think it's 4 lithium batteries that are like AAA size inside here. So this is 12.8 volts, okay, and has a certain amount of amperes. I think this is 800 amperes, all right, and it's very light. If you use nickel metal hydride for this, it would weigh twice as much. And in fact, you couldn't get it that small. You couldn't get 12.8 volts. So by getting this many volts, you can get more power to this vehicle, which is very light. And so you get a lot of power in a small little bundle like this. But because the vehicle is light, it's not demanding a lot from this to move this vehicle. And so the battery doesn't heat up that much. This vehicle is significantly heavier. The motor is much larger. So you need a battery that has the capacity to let those electrons run out a lot more efficiently so it doesn't heat up so much and blow up. So I hope that made sense to you about batteries and why they are the sizes they are. All right, thanks again.